The Town of Duck has launched a wildlife resource page to help residents and visitors keep yards and pets safe and wild animals healthy. Along with the page, the town invited Chris Turner, a wildlife biologist with the NC Wildlife Resources Commission, to speak on ways to prevent and solve wildlife contact issues, including recent coyote populations.
I'm Chris Turner. I'm a coastal regional biologist in District 1 that includes the Outer Banks all the way from Corova to Hatteras, and a lot of the issues that I deal with are maybe very similar to other wildlife questions and management that takes place across the state. However, the Outer Banks is a very different piece of land. We have to keep in mind as residents on the Outer Banks is that we do have lots of different wildlife species that can live in close proximity to people and to residential areas. Some species are very common, including raccoons and possums and foxes. Some species are certainly present, but we may not see them as often as common species. Those would include coyotes. Sometimes wildlife gets a little close to home. We have wildlife habitat not just along the shore, but within residential type areas as well. Sometimes situations take the form of nuisance type situations or other conflicts, including property damage from wildlife. In dealing with wildlife conflicts, the first step that we always try to take is one of prevention. That is typically removing attractants that bring wildlife into close proximity with people. One of the contributing factors to probably most conflicts comes in the form of food that may be available around residences or in subdivisions. That food would take the form of trash, table scraps, pet food, or sometimes even bird feeders can create an issue where wildlife repeatedly begins to use free, easy food and can even become habituated to being around people. When we remove attractants, we certainly take the first step, but I think hand in hand with removing attractants would come hazing and trying to keep wildlife wild. Whenever people have questions about wildlife or interactions with wildlife, a great resource is the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission's website at ncwildlife.org. Under the Have a Problem with Wildlife tab, it links you to contacts of people who can assist with some wildlife issues, and it also has a lot of information regarding coexisting with wildlife. We have wildlife on the Outer Banks, and it certainly pays to understand what species we have and how we might best coexist. The management tools that are available to manage wildlife populations across the state, including the Outer Banks, are very similar regardless of the species that we're talking about. There's a toolbox available to manage a population of different wildlife species, and also a toolbox with tools available to help manage situations that might arise when it comes down to coexisting with wildlife. With habitat on the Outer Banks, we will always have some species. There's nothing that we can do to say that we won't have coyotes or raccoons or foxes. In the end, it comes down to managing those populations and to be able to manage situations with the tools that are available.